right, now let's go to Ethiopia. As we see, there's been some development in that region, as we see that the issue of committed war crimes, and the United States is determined that everyone involved would pay for it. Meanwhile, we see that Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has established an interim administration for the Horn of Africa's country, northern region of Tigray, a key step in the implementation of a peace plan to end war there. What does all this mean for the economy, especially? We have Matt Kindiga, he's a practice leader with SSA Frontier View, joining us from London. Hi, Matt. Good afternoon. Good to have you on the show this afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me on the program today.
Great. So what does this formation of a government in Tigray mean for the prospect of lasting peace in Ethiopia?
Yeah, so in our view, it is generally a positive development, and it does mean that there is likely to be much more constructive engagement between the federal government and the Tigrayan government over the next couple of months. And it's also worth remembering that this development comes in parallel with the Ethiopian Federal Parliament officially removing the TPLF from a list of terrorist organizations. So again, this will engender some goodwill between both sides, and it is overall part of a sign that we're seeing some more positive development for lasting peace in the country. However, I would emphasize that the peace agreement in Ethiopia, especially between the federal government and the Tigrayans, remains quite fragile. And this is because the presence of Eritrean troops in Ethiopia, especially in Tigray, remains fairly unaddressed. And this could be a source of tensions between Tigray and the Eritreans. We also have the role of other regions' armed forces, especially from Amhara and Oromia. They could result in some sort of tensions between Tigray and the rest of the country. So there are still some uncertainties there, but I would say there is a very strong desire by both sides because of the impacts of the civil conflict over the last couple of years on the central government's economy, but also the humanitarian crisis that we're seeing in the north of the country. So our view is that there's probably going to be slow progress, but there is still some risk to the outlook for the peace agreement.
So we do know that Africa is getting a lot of attention from the United States, but let's look at one of the past visits. Will Blinken's visit to Addis Ababa improve chances of Ethiopia being readmitted, to the U.S. AGOA trade program? Do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, Blinken's visit was very important because Ethiopia really wants to be readmitted to the AGOA trade program. It provides Ethiopia and other African countries with preferential access to the US market, which is massive. So again, I think it's a positive development because it shows that the Biden administration and Ethiopia want to reestablish improved ties. So traditionally, Ethiopia was a relatively strong US ally, and it was quite enthusiastic about Ethiopia's, well, the US was quite enthusiastic about Ethiopia's development. So there is, it's a positive sign, but I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done. Blinken's statement that he believed that war crimes were committed on both sides will likely displease the Ethiopian government. It's already expressed some displeasure at this. So our view is that there's a lot more work to be done, and there should not be an expectation that the Ethiopian economy will be readmitted to AGOA. And this does mean that sort of exports from the economy, sentiment from investors into the economy will be slightly muted for the next couple of months or maybe even years.
So how do you think all of this will affect the currency on one hand, the economy, looking at the bigger picture?
Yeah, so very broadly looking at the economy, there's no question about it that the Ethiopian economy is under pressure. The economy will continue to grow over the next couple of years, in our view. It's going to grow by about 4%, maybe 4.5% in 2023 and 2024. This sounds quite good by global standards. There are certain industries that are doing quite well. Infrastructure investment, agriculture production is also improving in parts of the country that are not affected by the civil conflict. And there's also gold mining. But really, 4% growth is some of Ethiopia's worst performance since at least the early 2000s. So by Ethiopian standards, it's not great. We are seeing very weak investor sentiment. And there are rather extreme currency shortages in the country. So looking at the currency, We are expecting the birr to gradually lose value over the next year or so. The central bank has imposed very harsh currency access restrictions. Only essential products, medicines, for example, inputs into manufacturing are permitted to be imported into the country. And for the foreseeable future, we believe this will remain the status quo. So this is why it's so important that relations between Ethiopia and the US improve, that it's readmitted to AGOA, and that there is lasting peace in the north of the country, because then investors will once again want to revisit Ethiopia. Until then, the currency will remain under pressure, in our view.
Yeah, unfortunately, Matt. Well, thank you so much for giving us the picture of what's going on in Ethiopia there, especially Tigray. Matt Kiniga is a practice leader with SSA Front of You. Thank you so much.
Thanks.